threats from Donald Trump, who's attacking our country. And the way we win this fight against the threats of Donald Trump is not by making Canada more like the United States. That's not how we do this. The way we win this fight is by doubling down on who we are as a country, by doubling down on the values that make us who we are. We believe in taking care of each other. It's a Canadian value. It's why we have things like healthcare. We also believe in taking care of our country, taking care of the land, the air and the water. Protecting our environment is what makes us Canadian as well. So when we fight back against Donald Trump, we got to fight back by defending what is dear to us, what is true to who we are. And so today we're talking about our plan to defend our environment, to protect our country. Here are just some of the first steps that we would take as a New Democrat government. We would remove the carbon tax, the consumer carbon tax, and take off that burden from everyday families. But we would make sure big polluters pay their share. This is very important. And one of the things that we want to do, and the part of the plan I want to talk about today, is the fact that your hard-earned public money is being given to highly profitable oil and gas companies. They're receiving massive subsidies every year. That has to end. New Democrats would once and for all end those subsidies. They must end. And we would use that money instead of giving it to highly profitable oil and gas companies. Instead, we would give supports to everyday families, because that's who we're in it for. We're not in it for the billionaires like the other parties. We're in it for you and your family. So we would cancel those subsidies and use that money to give everyday families the ability to retrofit their homes, to lower their energy costs, to save them money and reduce their emissions. That's a plan that works for people, not for the billionaires. So our plan would help 3.3 million homes get retrofitted. We would support low-income families with free upgrades, free retrofits to their homes, and then the remaining would be loans and grants to help higher-income families. Over 10 years, our plan is to get 3.3 million homes retrofitted, lowering their costs, lowering their emissions, helping families out. And what are the other plans, though, from the other parties? Well, Mark Carney still believes in giving away your hard-earned public money to highly profitable oil and gas companies. He would continue to do that in his plan, and that is wrong. Pierre Poilievre's plan is to let big polluters pollute as much as they want. He wants to eliminate entirely any barriers, any limits to how much they pollute. That means unlimited pollution into the land, water, and to the air. That is clearly the wrong plan. Our plan is about taking away from the highly profitable oil and gas companies and giving to everyday people, to helping out families. And that's why New Democrats are in it for you. That's why our plan is one that's always going to be in it for you. Donc, on a des grands défis devant nous.
We're facing major challenges right now. The climate crisis is hitting us hard, and then there are Donald Trump's threats. We cannot win that battle against Donald Trump by becoming more like him. We have to reinforce our values, the values that we hold dear. In Canada, we take care of each other. That is a Canadian value. At the same time, we take care of each other. We also take care of our environment. We protect our environment, and we have to do that. So today, I want to talk about the first step of our plan to protect the environment. We will begin by eliminating the consumer carbon tax, but continue to make the big polluters pay, and we'll try to stop them from polluting. And we will finally eliminate oil and gas subsidies. These are companies making massive profits, and we should not be giving away money to them. We should not be giving your money to these companies. So we will get rid of that. And we will use that money to help families with energy retrofits, and that will bring down the cost of energy for these families, and it will also reduce emissions. Now, that is a plan that helps people, not billionaires. And what are the plans from the other parties? Well, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives want to let the big polluters pollute as much as they want. But that's not the right thing to do. It's wrong. And Mark Carney's plan is to continue to give your money to these these big oil companies. Once again, I think he's wrong. So our plan is to help people, not billionaires, and that is why we are on your side. So thank you.
Merci beaucoup. On va maintenant passer à la période de questions. Une question et une relance. We'll now take the questions from the press. One question and one follow-up. We'll begin with Janice McGregor, CBC.
Hi, welcome all of you. It's hard to imagine that your NDP base wouldn't vote for you this time, given all the things that you have achieved and the things that you've listed off you would achieve. But with this surgence of the fear factor, the people may feel they have to vote for a larger party in order to deal with Trump, et cetera. How are you going to hold on to that NDP base and grow it a little bit in order to prevent any loss of seats?
Thank you. I think it's a really important question. We know that folks are worried about what Pierre Poilievre is proposing. Despite the fact that he's having big problems with his campaign, there seems to be a lot of infighting that's being reported, that his campaign seems to be falling apart from the inside because they're more busy fighting each other than they are fighting for Canadians. But if you are worried about Conservatives, it is clear here on the island, New Democrats beat Conservatives every single time. It's New Democrats that will beat Conservatives. And it's really about who do you want fighting for you. You know, with the storm that Donald Trump presents, we are in this storm. You don't have to choose between a leaky roof or a cracked foundation. The Liberals have let you down. And without New Democrats, we know that they won't act. New Democrats, we showed that in the previous minority government. Fighting for you is what we do every single day. Electing a New Democrat is electing someone that's going to fight for you and your family. We are only focused on your needs. We're not in it for the millionaires. We're not in it for the billionaires. And proof of that is our plan today. Ending the fossil fuel subsidies, going to highly profitable oil and gas companies to give families the ability to retrofit their homes. It shows you whose side we're on. The fact that Mark Carney wants to continue to give these companies massive subsidies shows you he's not really in it for you the same way. And Pierre Poilievre, the Conservatives, they want to let polluters pollute as much as they want. So if you want someone on your side fighting for you, elect these amazing folks behind me. They're going to fight for you. They're going to put your family first.
And my follow-up, and sorry, I should have introduced myself, Mary Brooke, Island Social Trends, local to the island here. So speaking of local candidates, and when some people who might be confused about how to vote in this election, they hear about strategic voting. How can voting for the local candidate actually help the NDP do these things, do these things for people in the House of Commons once you get there, where they're kind of being told that the bigger parties need to have these majorities?
Yeah, well, just look at what happened recently. Because you elected 25 New Democrats, we saw the biggest expansion of our healthcare in a generation with dental care that has now helped millions of Canadians get their teeth looked after. That would never have happened but for New Democrats. Sending a New Democrat means you get someone that's going to fight for you, not for the billionaires, not for rich CEOs, but for you and your family. Sending a New Democrat means we were able to achieve pharmacare. That's going to be here in BC. People are going to get free diabetes medication and devices. 25 New Democrats did that. Imagine what we could do if you sent more of us to Ottawa. If you elect enough of us, and you give me the honor of being Prime Minister, I will fight for you every single day. Electing New Democrats will make a big difference in your life. So I encourage you all, wherever you live, vote for a New Democrat. That's the only way you're guaranteed to have someone that's actually going to be in there for you. With the threat of Donald Trump and the threat to workers, the threat to our environment, the threat to our very way of life, who's going to be putting you and your family first every single day? Who's going to make sure that when there's negotiations, we don't let our environment be on that negotiating table? We don't let workers' rights get on that negotiating table. We don't let our public universal health care be on that negotiating table. New Democrats are the only ones you can count on. They're going to be in it for you.
Thank you very much. Now, Janice. Janice McGregor, CBC.
Yeah, good morning. I want to talk to you about the meeting you're having with BC Premier shortly, particularly on a day where there's going to be a vigorous debate at the legislature over the future of the provincial carbon tax scheme. what is the relationship like right now between the provincial NDP and the federal NDP when it comes to climate policy? Is there any space between you at the moment? And how does that figure into your ground game in this federal election, particularly on Vancouver Island, where there is still a significant Green vote? One of the candidates behind you, I think, is running against Ms. May. You know, in BC, there is space between New Democrats and Greens. So can you just talk to me about the significance of this meeting and whether you are aligned with the provincial party on this climate policy?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the meeting with Premier Eby. New Democrats are all committed to fighting back against the climate crisis. We want to protect our environment, we want to protect our land, our water, our air, and we're all committed to that. And we're committed to doing that in a way that also protects working people and supports middle-class families. And so that's our shared vision. And then the candidate you mentioned, that's Colin Plants, and we're looking forward to him becoming the next member of parliament in this upcoming election. New Democrats have shown you again and again, we are committed to fighting for you and your families, fighting for the working class, for the middle class, and also deeply committed to protecting our environment. You've heard from Laurel Collins, our critic on the environment, the passion that we have as New Democrats for protecting our country and our planet. And we're continue to put forward that vision. And so today's plan is a real clear couple of first steps that we're going to take, bold steps that show you how we are committed to fighting for a future where my two daughters can grow up and still be able to enjoy this beautiful country, this environment that you see around you. It's something we hold very dear as Canadians. And the only way we protect it is by making it a priority. And New Democrats are committed to that. Oui, je suis tellement... Je suis excité d'avoir ma rencontre avec Premier ministre Eby. On partage les valeurs néo-démocrates, de défendre notre environnement. C'est quelque chose qui est tellement important pour nous. Vous avez parlé du candidat qui va...
You talked about the candidate who will defeat Elizabeth May, that's Colin Plant. And that's because our values are Canadian values. They're the values of people who live here in British Columbia. We're going to protect workers. We're going to protect everyday Canadians. And at the same time, we will also protect the environment. We have shown our plan to do that. And today is a first step in that plan. And we talk about how we're going to get rid of oil and gas subsidies so that we can invest more in energy retrofits for Canadian families. So our mission is to defend Canadians, and that includes the environment.
To follow up, you're headed to Edmonton tonight, where again carbon pricing has been a huge issue, including for the provincial NDP in Alberta. Is the federal party in alignment with the provincial NDP in Alberta? Are you going to meet with Mr. Nenshi when you're in Edmonton? And in particular, are you aligned on the industrial price on carbon, which, you know, I know at the provincial level has been very key, and you know, it may be the provinces that sort of set that in certain jurisdictions, and I'm just wondering if you can speak to that.
Well, New Democrats, as you can imagine, being a party that reaches across the country, will have many shared values and then some regional differences. We're presenting our vision for the country as the federal New Democrats. And our vision is one where we share with all New Democrats that we want to put people first, not the billionaires, not the millionaires. And we are showing that in every announcement that we make. The difference between us and Mark Carney, the difference between us and Pierre Poilievre. Today our plan is to end the fossil fuel subsidies and use that instead to help families retrofit their homes. A fossil fuel subsidy the Liberals have put in place and have kept in place for nearly a decade, and a fossil fuel subsidy that Mark Carney wants to continue. He wants to continue to give your public money to highly profitable oil and gas companies. I think it's clearly the wrong thing to do, but he wants to continue to do it. It shows you he's just not in it for you the same way as we are. We're committed to ending that subsidy and investing in people so they can lower their energy costs, lower their energy bills. And when we go to Edmonton today, we're going to share that vision with the people of Edmonton, how New Democrats are in it for you. If you want someone that's going to fight for you in these uncertain times, who can you count on to always put you and your family first, not put rich CEOs or billionaires first? That's us. That's New Democrats. Wherever you live in this country, you need a New Democrat fighting for you.
Thank you very much. Now Rachel Eel, CTV.
Good morning, everyone. Today, Pierre Poilievre is talking about building a national energy corridor and fast-tracking building more pipelines, while saying they would still uphold environmental assessments and consulting Indigenous communities. I'm just wondering what you make of his announcement today in contrast to yours.
Well, one of the things that we're seeing from Pierre Poilievre is that in the face of a Donald Trump threat, Donald Trump's threat is making people say, okay, maybe we need to make Canada more like the United States. So maybe we need to stop having the same concern around the way we consult with local communities before we make a decision. Maybe we need to, water down our environmental protections. Maybe we need to ignore the rights of Indigenous people. I reject that approach. In building the Canada that I imagine that Canadians want is a Canada where we are proud of the fact that we are different than the United States. We're proud of the fact that we actually want to work with communities, make sure there's public buy-in before we move forward with an energy project, that we want to make sure that the highest environmental standards are being met, that we work with Indigenous communities for energy projects. The project that I favor, where we could build a nation-building energy project, is an east-west energy grid, where we connect and electrify our country, where we bring low-cost, affordable electricity, lower people's electricity bills, have it easier to access electricity for business and industry and manufacturing companies, so that we can build a climate where we are strong as a nation with clean energy that's affordable. That's the type of nation building that I want to see happen.
And Liberal leader Mark Carney said this morning that he still has confidence in his candidate, Paul Chang. I'm wondering what you make of that and what message does that send?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question. I want to reflect on this for a moment. Just for context, Paul Chang told a group of supporters that they should collect a bounty on the head of his Conservative candidate. That is chilling to hear. That is scary to hear that. And in the context where there are many Canadians living in our country that left behind oppressive governments, oppressive regimes to come to a democratic nation where they could be free. And they came here hoping they could express their thoughts, criticize maybe what's going on in their countries of origin and say what's going on is wrong, human rights violations are wrong. And people come to this country and continue to face harassment, intimidation. People from South Asian communities, Iranian communities, people from China are constantly living in the ongoing fear that they're being harassed, they're being threatened, their families are being threatened. And to hear a candidate for the Liberal Party effectively say, go out and get the bounty on my opponent's head, it is really scary to hear that. For those folks, it's really disturbing. And for Mark Carney to say that I'm going to accept this candidate really sends a message that that type of commentary ultimately is acceptable because he's not removing him as a candidate. Ultimately saying that for the folks out there that are worried and afraid, the folks that are living with that constant fear, you know what? You're less important to me, and what's more important to me is my party. He's putting his party ahead of his country in that case. I think that's wrong. And I think Canadians should find that wrong as well.
Thank you very much.
Donc le contexte, c'est le fait que Paul Chang.
So the context is the fact that Paul Chang encouraged his supporters, and he is a Liberal candidate. He encouraged his supporters to collect a bounty on the head of a political opponent. This money was being offered by a foreign government. And I think that is worrisome, very worrisome. It's serious. And the fact that Mark Carney says he's going to continue to support his candidate means for families and people who are afraid of foreign interference and who are experiencing this kind of experience, intimidation, harassment, and so on, well, it means that you are less important and his team is more important. So he has decided to protect his party rather than his country. And I think that's wrong.
Thank you. Now, Daryl Greer, Canadian Press.
You've been talking about the differences between you and your opponents. But when it comes to the carbon tax, all three parties seem to have aligned against it due to its perhaps perceived unpopularity. Why not differentiate yourself by committing to it and admitting that it was perhaps an effective policy to combat climate change, even in the face of its unpopularity?
Well, we've said that we support, or we are going to remove the carbon tax off of consumers, but there are some massive differences between us and the other parties. The fact that we want to eliminate entirely the fossil fuel subsidies, and Mark Carney wants to continue to give your hard-earned money to these highly profitable companies is wrong, and that's a big difference between us and them. The fact that Pierre Poilievre wants to let big polluters pollute as much as they want is a big difference between us and them. We want big polluters to pay their fair share. We don't want big polluters to be able to pollute as much as they want. We want to protect our water and protect our land and protect our air from this pollution. We want to build a Canada where our kids can grow up and know that they're going to be safe. And so there's a big difference between the parties and us. Ultimately, though, if you look at the parties' differences, it's about whose side they're on. If you look at our approach to say we're going to stop this subsidy to these big oil and gas companies, it's about saying we're not in it for them. We don't want them to get big handouts. We want you to get support. We want everyday families to be able to retrofit their homes. And that's really the difference between us and them. We're in it for you, and Mark Carney seems to be in it for big polluters, to give them big subsidies, and Poilievre wants to let them pollute as much as possible. Those are the differences in this election.
And can you elaborate?
Okay. Il y a des grandes différences. Oui, on veut
There are
enlever
major
la
differences.
taxe
Yes, we want to remove the consumer
Il y a des
carbon
grandes
tax,
différences entre
but there are
notre
big
position
differences
et la
between
position
our
de Mark
position
Carney et de Pierre
and
Poilievre.
that of
Mark Carney
Pierre
veut continuer
Poilievre
de
and
donner
Mark
des
Carney.
subventions aux entreprises
Mark Carney
pétrolières.
wants
Ça
to
veut dire
continue to give
votre
subsidies to
argent
oil
public,
companies. That
votre
means that
argent
your money,
aux
public
grandes
money,
entreprises
will be given
pétrolières.
to
On veut
oil
éliminer
companies.
ça.
We
Ça,
want
c'est une
to
grande
get rid
différence.
of that. That's
On
a
veut
big
utiliser
difference.
cet argent
We
pour
want to
vous
use that
aider,
money
pour
to
aider
help you
les grandes
rather than
entreprises. On veut
helping
aider
big
monsieur, madame,
companies.
tout le monde.
We want to help
Et Pierre
everyday
Poilievre
Canadians. And Pierre
veut
Poilievre
laisser les grands
wants to
pollueurs
let big
polluer autant
polluters
qu'ils veulent.
pollute as much
C'est
as
une
they
position
want.
complètement
With
différente
that
de la
is a
nôtre.
position
On
that's
veut arrêter les
completely
grands
different from our
pollueurs
own.
de continuer de
We
polluer.
want to stop polluters, big polluters, from doing so.
Elaborate and perhaps explain exactly how this border carbon adjustment will work, who it'll apply to, how long will it be in place? Is it a temporary measure in the face of these tariffs, or is it something that you're going to just put a blanket across the board?
Sure, we can give you more of a technical briefing for more details, but in broad strokes, the idea is to have more fairness when we're trading with other countries that don't have an industrial price on pollution. Our approach would be if a country is trying to bring in products, like China, for example, that wants to bring in products to Canada, and they don't have a price on pollution, then there needs to be an adjustment to account for that. They can't be competing against Canadian companies who do have an industrial price on pollution and have an unfair playing field. So as long as a country doesn't have a similar price on pollution, there would be a carbon adjustment. So that would account for countries that don't actually put a price on pollution.
Thank you. Now, Marco Vigliotti, iPolitics.
Hey, so you discussed, your reason for keeping the industrial carbon pricing component. Pierre Poilievre has said we need to remove the entire regime, partly as a way to protect Canadian industries from disruptions or the threat of disruptions caused by the American tariffs. Considering that logic, do you buy that Canadian businesses need that certainty, need that protection that would be caused by potentially removing the industrial carbon pricing to deal with the tariffs?
I think that there are things that we need to do to strengthen our industry in Canada, to strengthen and support different sectors in our country, and we need to be targeted about that. We need to fight back against the tariffs. We need to remove those tariffs. We need to fight back against Donald Trump. And ultimately, when it comes to pollution, we don't want big polluters to pollute. We do need to have limits on that. And Pierre Poilievre is saying, no limits. Pollute as much as you want. Poison the water, poison the air. No limit to that. Clearly, that is the wrong approach. Our approach is one to say, yes, we're going to support our Canadian industries. Yes, we're going to fight back against the tariffs of Donald Trump, but we're not going to let big polluters pollute as much as they want. No, it's wrong. No, je n'accepte pas l'approche de Pierre Poilievre.
I don't accept Pierre Poilievre's approach. His approach is to let the big polluters pollute as much as they want. Yes, we have to face up against Donald Trump, and we're ready to do that. We're ready to support those sectors that are hit by tariffs. We're prepared to support our industries here in Canada, but we don't think, and we don't believe it's a good idea to let big polluters pollute. No. That's why we will keep limits on the pollution caused by big polluters.
I know it's early in the campaign, we're only starting week 2, but I'm curious about your own benchmark for success. If your party loses seats in this election, if you lose your own seat, will you step down?
My focus in this campaign is on what's in front of us, which is the serious threat of Donald Trump. And the question in this election is, who's going to be in it for you in that fight? Who's going to make you and your family the priority when you're worried about the threats to our economy, the threats to our jobs, the threat to our very sovereignty? And in the future negotiations that might take place, who's going to make sure they stand up for you and your family? Not someone that's going to make concessions to appease the billionaires, but someone that's going to say, you know what? Healthcare will never be on the table. Our environment will never be on the table. Our workers, our way of life will never be on the table. That's New Democrats. That's who you can count on.
So the key issue in this election is focusing on the action that is needed now. And in this election, the key question is Donald Trump's tariffs and who will be fighting for you. Not for billionaires, but for you and your family. And when there are negotiations, who will say, no, we will never make concessions on our environment, our healthcare system, our workers, our values, the values that we hold dear. That's the NDP.
Last question, dernière question. Juliane Lapointe, Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, Monsieur Singh.
Hello, Mr. Singh.
Vous venez de dire
you just
la
said
question qui sera là pour se battre
that the question is who will fight for Canadians. What we're hearing from activists and candidates is that they don't want you to fight Donald Trump. They don't see you as someone who is capable to stand up to Donald Trump. Do you think your time is over and that you will be gone after this campaign? Listen, we're in the middle of an election campaign, and I am focused on what needs to be done now. And in this election, I can say with confidence that the only party and the only leader and the only team that will focus on your priorities is the NDP. I'm confident when I say that. The other parties have shown what their priorities are. It's clear for Mark Carney. On the environment, you're not the priority. It's the big polluters. It's the big corporations. It's oil companies, because he continues to give your money to those companies. I want to cancel those subsidies. So it's clear in that example that I'm on your side, and Mark Carney is on the side of the big oil companies. So in this election, that continues to be the key issue. Who will fight for you? Who will defend you? Not CEOs and rich corporations and big oil companies. Who will defend your interests? So in the face of all the challenges and threats from Donald Trump, who's on your side? It's the NDP.
Mais pendant que vous dites ça, il y a d'anciens
as you're saying
stratèges
that, there are certain new Democrat strategists who are looking at your campaign and who know how a campaign should be run, and they're saying that this is a campaign with no oxygen, and that the NDP is not getting its message across. It's not resonating with Canadians according to polls. You cannot deny that. Based on the current numbers, are you afraid you will be blamed for those numbers, for results that we've rarely seen? Well, the issue is still the same, and I want to repeat it. In this election, the key issue is who's going to fight for you, and I'm confident in saying that, because I've seen the other parties. We looked at their plans. Their plans are not plans that are going to help you. They help the ultra-rich. They will help real estate giants. They will help oil companies. But our plan and our vision is a Canada where we defend people, workers in this country, everyday Canadians. And we will continue to share that message. We have a clear vision for Canada, and we have people who support that vision, and we're proud of that. We're proud of what we can do for people, what we can do for this country. So wherever you may be in this country, if you want someone who will really fight for you and your family, the choice is the NDP.
Merci.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Ceci conclut la conférence de presse. That concludes the press conference. Have a nice day. Bonne journée.
And you have been listening to NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh speaking to reporters in Victoria on the key electoral question being presented to Canadians. He said it is about Donald Trump's tariffs and who will be fighting for you, that we will never make concessions on our values. That's the NDP. And that is what differentiates the NDP from the Liberals and the Conservatives. And then on the question of Paul Chang, a Toronto area or Greater Toronto Area MP who said that his Conservative opponent could be handed over to China. He said that is chilling and scary to hear that many people come to this country leaving behind oppressive regimes, and to continue to face harassment and intimidation is wrong. And so is Mark Carney, Liberal leader Mark Carney's decision to stick by him. The CBC's Karina Roman was listening in to Jagmeet Singh. She joins me now live from Ottawa. So Karina, that's one of the main stories of the day, right?
Yes, and we'll get to that in a second. Jagmeet Singh really trying to frame the NDP as still in the game, still in this election, and still having a role to play. He's been asked questions numerous times, not so much like that at the end there, which was actually about his own future, but really what happens if the NDP is only a few seats? How can you keep talking about running for Prime Minister? And he has reframed the question or the answer, however you want to see it, as saying it really is about electing as many NDP MPs as possible. So not talking necessarily about forming government, but perhaps holding the balance of power or some power, showing what the NDP has been able to accomplish in the past parliament, which is all true. The pharmacare, dental care, COVID supports, a lot of that can be given credit to the NDP. But now framing it also in terms of that's why the NDP is good to stand up to Trump. So it's not just about who looks more prime ministerial or who has the biggest plan. It's who has the right priorities. And therefore talking about doubling down on defending Canadian values, whether we're talking about health care or we're talking about environmental protections, and that those should not be on the negotiating table. So trying to eke out that space for the NDP and have that message get out and hope that it resonates. In terms of, I just wanted to look at my notes here. In terms of his actual announcement, that is about, and something the NDP has pushed for a very long time, is ending fossil fuel subsidies. In this case, they would take that money and put it into a retrofit program for people's homes to make them more environmental and lower energy costs, but also lower emissions. And it would be free retrofits for people with low income, and it would be grants and loans for those who have higher incomes. So that's his actual announcement, showing that even though he is on board with dropping the consumer carbon tax, trying to show that he hasn't forgotten the environment. And I did think that question that he received about how can you agree with dropping what actually has been an effective measure, the consumer carbon tax, even if it's been unpopular, and sort of pivoting away from that to say there's still lots of differences between the NDP and the other big parties on the question of the environment. So that was the actual substance. Yep. But of course, the newsy part of that really was the question about Paul Chang and what his reaction is to Mark Carney keeping him as a candidate.
So remind us about that. Remind us about this issue on this candidate and what Mark Carney had to say earlier today.
And just to clarify, Jagmeet Singh said his opponent, they actually aren't running in the same riding. So Paul Chang is running as the Liberal candidate for Markham-Unionville. I think I've got that right. Joe Tay is a Conservative candidate in Don Valley North. I might have that wrong, but they're in different ridings. But one's a Liberal and one's a Conservative. And in January, to an ethnic media news conference, convention kind of situation, Paul Chang said that that people should get the bounty, go in and seek the bounty that's been put on Joe Tay's head by the Chinese-run Hong Kong government because they could profit from it, right? So turn him into the Chinese consulate in Toronto and you can go collect your bounty. Obviously, when these comments came to light, creating quite a bit of shock and disturbance that not only that he would say that, but he is also a former police officer would say that. So he has since apologized and called his own comments deplorable. Mark Carney has called the comments also horrible. But then Mark Carney was asked today, then how can you keep him on as a candidate? And Mark Carney saying, well, he's apologized. The comments are deeply offensive. It called it a terrible lapse in judgment that he has spoken with Chang. But this is what he had to say on keeping Chang as a candidate.
This is a person of integrity who served this community, his community, as a senior police officer for, as I said, more than a quarter century. He's made a terrible lapse in judgment. He's made an apology for that. It's also an individual who has family in Hong Kong. He's under no illusions about the situation there, the situation in broader China. He's made those apologies. He's made them directly to the individual concerned. He's made them directly to me. He has my confidence.
Now, Carney also called it a teachable moment, but from Joe Tay, the person targeted by these comments, he's saying no apology is sufficient, that this was an attempt to intimidate him, and he fears for his safety. So he said, I want to be clear, no apology is sufficient. Threats like these are the tradecraft of the Chinese Communist Party to interfere in Canada, and they are not just aimed at me. They are intended to send a chilling signal to the entire community in order to force compliance to Beijing's political goals. So not accepting the apology and saying that he had already reached out to the RCMP for possible protection, and this deepening his fear. Also hearing reaction from Michael Chong, the Conservative MP and candidate who has spoken out many times on foreign interference and obviously the threat of the Communist Party in China on people living abroad who speak out against the party. He himself was at the center of a story where he was the focus of foreign interference and intimidation. So his reaction is, and this is reaction, to Mr. Carney keeping him as a candidate. Paul Chang has uttered one of the most undemocratic things ever said in an election, that his political opponent be handed over to a hostile regime for a bounty. Mark Carney's decision to stand behind Chang will negatively impact our democracy for years to come. So I think you can see that Mark Carney has not put this to rest just by saying that the apology has happened, that this is someone of integrity who had a lapse in judgment. Clearly, the opposition, and there's plenty of civil society groups who fight for rights, human rights in Hong Kong, also calling for Chang to go.
As for the housing announcement, Mark Carney says he wants to do the impossible. Take us through the details of the plan.
Yes, the details that kind of got drowned out by all this controversy. This is their signature housing policy. The promise is to double the number of homes built each year in Canada to 500,000. That is what he said might be thought impossible, but it's something that Canada has to do. And he would do this by creating a new entity called the Build Canada Homes. It would act as a developer in overseeing the construction of affordable housing in Canada. So there would be billions, $25 billion for financing for prefabricated home building, and $10 billion in low-cost financing for affordable home building, at least to start. And it would actually be about the government getting back into building housing itself. Have a listen to what Carney had to say.
Getting government back into the business of building affordable homes, and by making the market work better, we will drive a huge increase in housing supply so we can bring costs down for Canadians. We will build at a pace not seen since the Second World War.
Now, Trump obviously has been a big issue in this election campaign so far, but housing still very, very key to most voters, especially affordable housing in the housing crisis that Canada faces. So this is their signature policy, but we've of course heard promises from the Conservative parties to take the GST off of new build homes under $1.3 million. We've heard from the NDP just yesterday talking about turning the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation into an actual mortgage lender of low interest loans to people. So I expect that this is something that we'll be talking about for some time.
Karina, thank you. The CBC's Karina Roman live in Ottawa. Excuse me. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is promising, if elected, to create a national energy corridor. He says it would allow businesses to build infrastructure like rail lines and pipelines to help ship resources across the Atlantic to Europe, something which could lower Canada's dependency on the U.S. Poilievre delivered this campaign announcement last hour in St. John, New Brunswick.
It is time to reverse the lost Liberal decade